approached us in Documenta, and Vesna too, and then the others, and suggested together with us to create materials for schools, which will follow the film more or less, or just give some kind of introduction and conclusion for schools to watch the film and then also like learn more about it. But what maybe you didn't hear today was that story of Budisavljević was forgotten for a long time. So after 1945, those of you who saw the movie saw it at the end, that all these cards with names, data of kids she was collecting and trying to unite families after the war with them was taken from her, from the newly communist government of Yugoslavia. The purpose of it was, as they said, that it's not supposed to be private property, but to be owned by the state. From the same government and people at the time, she was presented first of all as bourgeoisie, so she was from high class and just not, the correction was not important and she was not popular as such. Also, she was presented as a collaborator because of her Austrian origin. She was in contact with, at the time, Nazi representatives or German army representatives in Zagreb, but not as a collaborator, but as a way of looking for support. So they finally gave her permission, or have her to get permission to get to the camps and really save those children. Because all of this, she was just on purpose erased from the history, from books. Or if she's even mentioned, she's presented as some kind of activist of Red Cross, or with the name of her husband who led the action, which was of course not true, so just supporting him. And then in 2003, for the first time, her diary was published. She even didn't speak about what she did, about her action to her family, so nobody knew about it. But then her granddaughter accidentally found the diary in her house. And she was wondering what it is and learned more about what her grandmother did. She was dead at the time. And then approached different people, and the diary was finally published. But it was not very popular at the time. With the movie, the story of Diana Budisavljević was actually brought to a broader public, and she became known. Also, schools were visiting movies and watching the film, but then also space was open to speak more about her, but also to speak more about Ustaša violence, about the camps, because in Croatian curricula there is only one school hour dedicated to Holocaust, meaning in a year, in 8th grade, so final grade of primary school, or 4th or 3rd grade of secondary school and gymnasium. So only one. And usually they speak about Auschwitz and other German camps, mention Jasenovac, but that's mostly it. Maybe situation is better now, because from this school year, or last one, we have new textbooks. And in some of them, situation is a bit better, so there are more camps and bring broader picture. But it's also up to each teacher to see how much time it can dedicate to the topic. So our kids mostly learn about what Nazi did, what Germans did, but not that much about Ustaša crimes. So this movie and the materials we created were also really the good opportunity to speak more about Ustaša state, about funding of it, and then about the camps and the crimes committed by them. So this page is called, of course, Budisavljević, and it's let's say virtual museum of the movie and of herself. So you can also see about the film. And here are the materials. So what we created, I will just shortly show you. Is a handout for teachers, but okay, it's only in Croatian, sorry, but also a preparation for the schools. Then it was sent to agency for teacher training and education in Croatia to be approved by them. And actually it gets really good recensions. It was approved quite fast, which was also surprising both for us and for the team of the movie, because we were not sure what to expect. So they recommended it to schools to use them, and after that also the film was approved for schools. So they started really using it, and it was a big step also in knowing the story of Jelena Budisavljević, but also learning more about Ustaše crimes, as I said, and the segregation. So I will just shortly show you, so that's the front page. We created materials for secondary schools and gymnasiums because agency, also I created one for a primary school, but agency was not really, let's say, they recommended us not to do it with younger children, although I think 8th graders are learning about it anyway, but we created this only for secondary schools, and it can be used also with, younger children, not just the 4th grade when it's in the curricula, but then they need to have some pre-knowledge. Also, it is created as the, let's say, introductory part, so before watching the movie, which has chapters about Ustaše, about the independent state of Croatia, and starting of all these family camps and so on, and also about racial laws, and then the biography of Jelena Budisavljević, because if you see the movie, it's bringing you in the middle of the story. So without knowing this context and her story, it's hard to understand the film, especially if you are like a kid and don't know much about it. So that's why we thought at the time that it's important to give them some kind of introduction before watching the movie, so they can understand it more or less like in total. Then, so it will be for like 45 minutes, so the first school hour. And then they will watch the movie, which lasts for like 88 minutes, so let's say hour and a half, so it will be 2 more hours, and then we have one final. So after, which can be of course some comments and questions, although I think it's really important to do this session immediately after watching the film, because it's emotional, it's kind of difficult, it's a difficult topic, so it's important for kids to speak about it immediately. But then we also think it would be interesting for them to work on the sources. The most important, well, from my opinion, are the transcripts or personal stories of the witnesses from the movie, because you can see parts in the movie, but not the whole. So I had the privilege to see parts of the material they collected in their research for the movie, which lasted like for 10 years. So they collected a lot of historical sources and different materials, among them many testimonies of victims, of survivors, with some of them dead soon after. So it was really, it's quite a big thing. A part of this material will also be available on the webpage. So yeah, the final, after some conclusion after watching the movie, will be for them to work on these testimonies or some other sources, and then create some kind of poster or result, which will then be available for their other students to see it and learn more about the Budisavljević. So it's maybe difficult to do it in like a normal school year, but it can be also for the project days, maybe connected with Day of Holocaust Remembrance or some other days connected with this. So we created both for like a normal school year and then parts for the project days, which can be done as teacher decided to do it. It's mostly also for historians, of course, and history teachers, but with some adaptations it can be also used for other classes like Croatian language, connected with the diary of Jelena Budisavljević and others. Okay, I told you already about this. And then, okay, these are goals. I mean, main aim, of course, was to present the story of Diana and to meet her, but also her action, which is quite important, but also, as I said, to learn more about Ustaše regime and the independent state of Croatia. Okay, so let's see it. We also tried to introduce some kind of question part which might be useful for discussion. One of the things that was mentioned today, and I think it's really also important to speak about righteous among the nations, because they are really like important, awarded. And then we have the story of Jelena who was forgotten, who saved a lot of lives, and she was not rewarded, but also not remembered until here. And some other questions which are here. In the final, okay, this is a new part. In the final part, what we also suggested is that it will be good to work more on the private stories, really, of victims and survivors, because that's more impactful than speaking about numbers. And then also for kids to visit some places, maybe Jasenovac, but also usually they have some camps or something similar to it next to their homes or houses or schools or some nearby city. So also to focus on local history and to really introduce kids with the places, because sometimes or more often in Croatia they're not remember, they didn't have any kind of flag or kids don't know about it, so it would be also important and interesting for them to meet their local history and to see that this crime didn't happen somewhere in Nazi Germany, but also on the territory of Croatia. What I don't know actually is where they use the schools, because I don't know what happened with them later, but as far as I know, some of my colleagues who worked in school told me that they were shared on different groups where teachers are, so I really hope that they use them in schools and that they, find the public or do what we here supposed to. Okay, so that's more or less what I wanted to tell you. If you have any questions.
Right, just a comment, but in UK, in English schools, Holocaust is often mentioned within history programs, history courses, but mostly it's referred to as part of an integrated personal and social education using oral history and individual accounts, primary evidence. So it's not always taught to everybody as the Holocaust, and certainly there's no mention of what happened in Croatia. But individual, within social education, which is taught in secondary schools for an hour or two a week, there is a section on anti-racism and many other personal value-based parts of the curriculum, and Holocaust comes up there via personal histories.
And do you think it's...
I was a teacher, but I didn't teach history, or I taught other subjects. But it was very, I was impressed by the quality of that where I was teaching in London. It depends on the region. But it's left to the individual teacher to interpret how much they want to emphasise it.
No other questions, comments? I will leave floor to Martina.
I work here as a curator and also an educator, and after this one specific theme, I will give you a general outline of the educational program that we do here in Memorial Museum. We are now in the memorial room in the educational center, where the groups that are mostly schools that come here. And the educational program is made in 2006 after the permanent exhibition was opened. And it was made with the help of Teacher Training Academy, which is part of Ministry of Education. One of the main, some phases that we do with the students that come here, there are 3 phases of the guided tour and educational part. First one is that when students go to the monument, to the flower monument site, and with the help of the guides, with the help of the teachers, we give them some basic information about history of concentration camp, about certain sites, execution sites on the memorial area. Afterwards, after the guided tour is over, students come in the educational center and they are handed working sheets. And those working sheets are divided into 7 general themes that cover different aspects of the history of concentration camp. So, for example, there is a theme about prisoners, there is a theme about everyday life, about the independent state of Croatia and racial laws, and about the humanization and, at last, the resistance in the camp. And the main methodology of the work is work in groups, so the students are mostly divided, like they work together, like 4 or 5 or 6 students together, and they use the exhibition as a source of the information. So they write those information on those working sheets, and there is also a part where in those working sheets they need to give their own opinion and maybe to condemn the independent state of Croatia and its laws. And that is the last part that we do during the whole guiding tour, is when they return to the educational center and they give the answers, and also we have some kind of a reflection on the whole visit and how it affected them. So this is the general part of that education that we do, but also we have a lot of others, like seminars and conferences, and we also go in the schools if, for example, if there is any problem, if some teachers want to come to Jasenovac, but, for example, they don't have time, they don't have funds to do it, we often then go to the schools. And we also have that kind of thematic lessons there. There was a lessons on propaganda, for example. So we do have that cooperation with schools and Ministry of Education. But in last time we kind of do introspection. We introspect that kind of educational program, and we try to incorporate it in the one general project that Jasenovac Memorial Site was part of, and that was a project of 3D visualization of the concentration camp. If you have visited the exhibition, you probably saw the panorama inside, and that is only one part of that project, one result. But the project that was called Accessing Campscapes. Access was a 3-year cooperation between Jasenovac Memorial Site and different memorials in the Europe and different technology companies on the sites where there are no physical remains of the camp. You saw that there are no physical traces, that the physical traces of the camp are symbolized with the hills and the inverted hills, and those symbolize the buildings inside the camp, and so-called that working camp brickworks. So the main goal was to see how to visually represent the camp that is no longer here, those traces that are no longer there. There were some innovative approaches regarding that visualization. Companies that work here from Barcelona, they used non-invasive methodologies and non-invasive technologies, for example, like satellite shots and GPS photographs, and they also used the photometry that used that converted photographs from the site to the 3D objects. And those 3D objects could be seen in a tablet application and also on the panorama. But even though if panorama and tablet, they use the same software, the certain themes are specially designed for tablet and specially designed for panorama. I will give you the tablet, and since the mode is manual, so but the main idea is to go to the monument, to the area, and to use the tablet and walk around, you know, those hills and those that memorial area to see where the buildings were. For that reconstruction, the photographs were used, mostly aerial photographs by British Allied forces that were made in March 1945. There also what is used to make it work are testimonies. Some testimonies bring a lot of information about how the camp looked like, about where the certain locations were. So it all helped with mapping those buildings. So I will give you a tablet, and then you can click on the certain building, and what is now the task for us is to implement that kind of technology and that kind of visual representation in the education, and to see how the students will answer to this. But for now, we do have very positive compliments about that application and about visual representation, because it is very hard to imagine something that is not there anymore. And that company that made those 3D objects and those models, their main idea, they were guided with something in psychology that connects moving through the space and movement with the memory, and how we remember better during walks, for example, and when we can see what was there. So we are now trying to implement it in our educational program. And if you have any comments on that kind of the approach, and if you have seen that kind of approach, I would be very glad to comment on that. And some other memorial sites that worked on the project were also Bergen-Belsen, Falstadt, Westerbork, Leti, and all those are the camps where there are no physical traces left. So we do hope that that kind of approach will bring more and more schools to Jasenovac, and to learn about the consequences, and to learn about what happened here in the Second World War.
I have some questions.
Okay.
Just to be sure that I understood correctly, so this is an app that you can use only here on this side, or you can use it outside as well?
Yes.
No, only here.
For now, only here, because that is the idea. When you get the tablet, you go to the area and walk around with the tablet, and then there is also they're also connected with the certain building like testimonies and photographs and documents to that certain building, you know. So that is the main idea, like to walk around and to see what is on the site, even though it's not physically there.
And who financed this project, or did you get the funding for it? I guess it's not that easy.
Yeah,
did you develop this technology, or you just used it somewhere else?
Project was held from 2016 to 2019. So it was a 3-year project, but it's still some parts of the projects are still continuing. For example, the panorama part, which is always upgrading, you know. It is financed by the European Union project of Horizon 2020 and the Ministry of Culture partly. So it is how it's financed, but mostly with European Union funds.
If I may just add something, the project was started by an owner of one technological company from Barcelona. He is originally from Netherlands, and his grandfather was a member of the Dutch resistance movement, and he was killed in Bergen-Belsen camp. And when he visited the camp, he felt that something could be done for the visitors to understand better the place, since not much remained from the original camp. So it was the first project that he did, and the company did, was in Bergen-Belsen memorial, but then also some other memorials that Martina also mentioned in Leti, that's in Czech Republic, Falstad in Norway, Westerbork in Netherlands, and here in Jasenovac. So it's kind of a European project, and yes, it was funded by this project of the European Union, but some other non-developments have been financed also by the Ministry of Culture, which is our ministry, which is we are under that ministry as well. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Do you have any comments about that regular educational part that we do here, that group work, that students go to the museum and explore the exhibition by themselves? You know, if you have seen that kind of approach.
Not really about that, because I think that is road well traveled and it's a good road. But when seeing the new biographies exhibition which